Okay, sorry. We got it.
Okay, just for the record, I just want to be sure who all we have on the Zoom. So we have Sarah Mitchell, she's representing the appellant in the appeal action tonight. We have Chris Crean, who is the city's attorney. Paul Keith, mayor. Kelly Doherty is an interested participant, I'm assuming. And Stephen McElroy. And Sam, we're assuming Sam, is that you, right, Miss?
Yeah, I've been trying to fix it so it didn't say Sim, but I can't get in if I change it to Ragna, so I don't know.
Okay, we're good. We just want to make sure we knew who was there. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so do we have, moving on to the approval of minutes. Did we not have an approval for the last 4 minutes? Is that?
Yeah, yeah, it's that you've got that much history to go back and catch up on. And there's one that's not in there yet. February, I don't remember what the 24th will be the next time we meet. We'll have the February 24th and this one as well. So yes, there's quite a history there.
Okay.
So do you want us to motion to approve minutes per day, or can we just make a motion, lump all the dates into?
You can do them all at once, as long as you're not gonna request any changes to any of them. So what you might wanna do is just confirm that everybody is comfortable with all of them as presented, and then if so, you could do it as one motion. But if you're gonna start making changes to any of them, then I would suggest that you do those as individual actions.
I read through all of them, so
Yeah.
I didn't have a problem.
Okay, then you could certainly take action to approve them all at once.
Yeah, the only thing I saw was there was like some typos. Chris, instead of, didn't have the H in it, it was just CRIS, just typo kinds of things.
Okay, so there wasn't anything from a content perspective. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so yes, you could just take action and do them, you need to list them all in your motion, but you could certainly do them all in one motion. And then unless somebody specifically includes in the motion to correct those typographical errors, they will be approved as is, unless that's specifically called out.
Okay, Ragnar, did you have a problem with the misspellings?
No, I don't care really. It's just a matter of how much you want to have to present it as professionally done, But yeah, if you don't care about typos, I could care less. It's just fun to find.
You want to throw the date at us, we can certainly identify those and then make those corrections.
No, I got bored finding them all.
Okay. All righty.
I'd like to move to approve the minutes from September 8th, 2021, September 15th, 2021, October 6th, 2021, and February 2nd, 2022. As presented.
Do we have a motion on the floor to accept the minutes from the 4 dates as stated? Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
There's been a motion and a second. We get a roll call to.
Do that. Commissioner Tunick,
Yes.
Commissioner Jimenez,
Yes.
Commissioner Irons,
Yes.
Commissioner Layton,
Yes.
Commissioner Salata,
Yes.
And Vice Chair Brucey.
Yes.
Okay.
And motion passes unanimously. No old business at this time, still have no old business, correct?
You know, I'm trying to figure that out, but as far as I can tell, there's no old business. If I discover there's something, it'll be on the next agenda. So, yep. If you guys are aware of something that might be old business, don't hesitate to let me know. Okay.
All right, so time to move on to public hearing. Public hearing on replat R22-001. The city of Boardman applicant owner is called to order. The property is described as tax lot 4600-4900, assessors map 4 North 2590B, zone commercial highway sub-district, is located on Fourth Street. Request is to replat approximately 3.8 acres, moving a lot line to the west. Criteria for approval is found in the Board of Development Code, UC Chapter 4.3 land division and lot line adjustments. This public hearing this evening will be conducted as follows. Staff report. We'll run public testimony in the following order. The applicant, any testimony in support of the application, any testimony opposing the application, any neutral testimony, and the applicant's rebuttal if there is. We'll then close the public testimony. After the record is closed for testimony, no other testimony will be heard from anyone unless the planning commission has a specific question. Planning commission may ask questions of staff, after which the planning commission will discuss the matter and make a decision. Planning commission may make a final decision tonight, or the matter may be continued at a time and date certain in the future. If the matter is continued, this will be the only notice of that time and date you will receive. For the testimony, if you wish to speak, please fill out a testimony form and submit it to the city reporter, or recognize those people wishing to speak. Any questions should be addressed through me. Please state both your name and address for the record when you come to the podium, as the hearing is being recorded. Please keep testimony concise and to the point. Testimony should be on the action under consideration and address the substantive criteria. For the criteria that apply to the decision are listed in the staff report. Testimony on issues will be rejected, on other issues, will be rejected and not considered by the planning commission. Regarding raise it or waive it. Failure to raise an issue in sufficient detail to allow the planning commission and the parties the ability to respond to the issue if it's an appeal to the land use board of appeals based on that issue. Similarly, failure to raise constitutional or other issues regarding any conditions of approval is in sufficient detail to allow the planning commission to respond to the issue prohibits a lawsuit in circuit court on that basis. Regarding disclosure. Now, I asked the members of the planning commission to disclose any ex parte contacts, bias, or conflicts of interest. Please indicate the nature and extent of the ex parte contact, bias, or conflict of interest, and indicate whether you intend to participate in or abstain from the hearing. Does anyone in the audience wish to challenge the planning commissioner's impartiality? Hearing none regarding the staff report. Planning official Carla McLean will now present the staff report.
So before I start that, the recorder just learned that Ethan has been called out on a fire call, so he's not currently, he might be there, but he's not there. Just for the record, so. Okay, so this is a request to replat approximately 3.8 acres. We're simply moving a lot line to the west. The applicant and the owner of the property is the city of Boardman. It's 2 tax lots, 4,600 and 4,900 of Assessor's Map 4 North 25-9B. It is zoned commercial highway sub-district, or otherwise known as tourist commercial. It is north of Interstate 84 and east of Main Street. It is on the north side of Northeast Front between 2nd and 3rd Streets. Basic information, the city of Boardman seeks to sell a lot to the Boardman Community Development Association to allow development of retail and other commercial opportunities. The application has been filed under the City of Boardman Development Code, Chapter 4, Applications and Review Procedures, 4.3 Land Divisions and Lot Line Adjustments, specifically 4.3.200 replatting and vacation of plats. The criteria is below. It's identified in bold type and the responses are in regular type. So this is a replat of a replat. So this is not the first time we've been down this road. This used to all be part of Knutson's commercial park. The BMCC replat that created the current BMCC parcel was the first replat, and now we are replatting it again. So we just keep making changes to the property, and each time we do that, it changes again. So when this was originally developed, it was, again, I don't know all the history, but I can only assume that it was put through the paces the first time, and I'm fairly certain when the replat was done for the BMCC property, it also went through those steps as well. There are provisions for a replat in the development code. Because the city is the applicant here, we decided to take what would have normally been a type 2 process and bump it up to a type 3 process. It was a planning official decision to do that, just to give it a little bit more transparency, put it in front of the planning commission for a public hearing. So that's why we're here tonight. There's no basis for denial. There's no public uses, improvements, streets or alleys that are impacted by this request and approval, and all the applicable criteria can and are met. I do want to mention about alleys. If you look at the map that is included with the packet, just north of this property is a large parcel. It's about 10.5 acres that is currently owned by the city, the Catholic Church. I almost said the city of Boardman, and it's the Catholic Church. We've been in conversations with the church. The church is interested in developing that property and building a new church. So we did meet with them just yesterday. We've been trying to connect for a while. Prior to this, because we will be doing a plat, we want to work with the church. They also need, in order to move forward with their development, they need to dedicate Northeast 3rd Street. And we're also asking to develop or to dedicate an alley that would run along the southern boundary of their property and the northern boundary of the city property there to connect 2nd and 3rd Street. That alley could provide an access to the church property. They will need to have 2 accesses to that parcel in order to develop it for fire safety and other reasons. The alley on the backside could also provide delivery, truck delivery access and other things for commercial development that happens along there. So we're hoping to incorporate that on the same plat. It's really not a part of this decision, but again, just having that conversation, letting you know what's coming. The recording of vacations. No vacations are requested or approved with this. There's nothing being, no streets are being vacated, no alleys are being vacated. If anything, we're going to approve an alley through this process with dedication along the northern boundary of the city property, and then what would be the boundary of the church property. No lots that are part of this replat have been sold, so the provision there about after sale of lots is not applicable. Again, no street is proposed to be vacated, and Requirement to maintain access. Access is available along Northeast Front Street. That access will continue. Nothing is changing there. And again, with the proposed alley across the northern, the length of the northern edge of the city property, additional access could be found through that alley provision. Short staff report, happy to answer any questions. And I guess, Vice Chair Barisi, I should have realized that both of these actions, the city is the applicant. So the city is serving as staff and they are also serving as applicants. So the applicant's presentation, unless city manager Karen Pettigrew wants to add anything from the city's perspective, I think that would conclude not only the staff report, and I'm happy to answer questions of staff, but it would also serve as the applicant testimony.
Works for me.
Okay.
Is there any additional correspondence beyond the items included in the staff report?
No. Well, no correspondence that was written. Teresa Penberg, who is the Region 5 Planning Manager for the Oregon Department of Transportation, did call. She and I talked last week. She said she received it. Actually, she received both, and she didn't have any comment on either of them. But for this action, she had no comment on this one. The reason we notified ODOT was so at both of the interchanges in Boardman, both the Main Street interchange and the Port Morrow interchange, there is in place an interchange area management plan. It's a pretty large document that kind of guides how land use and transportation will cooperate at these interchanges. They both have what's called a management area associated with them. This property for the replat is actually just outside of that management area, but it's just outside of it. So in an abundance of caution, we went ahead and noticed ODOT as well. Yeah.
Was there any other testimony that, as the applicant, you would like to present at this time?
I don't think so.
Does anyone wish to speak in favor of the application? Hearing none. Does anyone wish to speak against the application? Hearing none. Does anyone have neutral testimony? And without any testimony being heard, there is nothing to rebut.
Oh, well.
Okay, the public testimony portion of this hearing is now closed. Does staff need to respond to a question raised by testimony? Does the planning commission have any questions? of staff? Any commissioners on the interwebs have any questions? Any discussion from the planning commission? Hearing none, is there a motion?
We have to, I move to adopt planning official recommendation for the requirement Requesting condition of approval. Cause the replat, BMC. Replat to be recorded in Monroe County, meaning the approval requirements of the Boardman Development Code and the Oregon Revised Statute, Chapter 92.
Was motion and a second.
Commissioner Tonight,
Yes. Did we hear the second? I didn't hear it.
we got a second from Sam Irons.
Okay, yeah, it's really faint when I hear you guys. So yes,
Commissioner Jimenez,
Yes.
Commissioner Irons,
Yes.
Commissioner Layton,
Yes.
Commissioner Salata,
yes,
and Vice Chair Boardman.
Yes. The public hearing on appeal AP 22-003 is called to order. The public hearing this evening will be conducted as follows. Staff report, public testimony in the following order. Applicant. Any testimony in support of the application, excuse me. Any testimony opposing the application. Any neutral testimony. And then the applicant's rebuttal, if there is any. We'll then close the public testimony. After the record is closed for testimony, no other testimony will be heard from anyone unless the planning commission has a specific question. Planning commission may ask questions of staff, after which the planning commission will discuss the matter and make a decision. Planning commission may make a final decision tonight, or the matter may be continued to a time and date certain in the future. If the matter is continued, this will be the only notice of that time and date you will receive. If you wish to speak, please fill out a testimony form and submit it to the city recorder. I will recognize those people wishing to speak. Any questions should be addressed through me. Please state both your name and address for the record when you come up to the podium, as the hearing is being recorded. Please keep testimony concise and to the point. Testimony should be on the action under consideration and address the substantive criteria. The criteria that apply to the decision are listed in the staff report. Testimony on other issues will be rejected and not considered by the planning commission. Failure to raise an issue in sufficient detail to allow the planning commission and the parties the ability to respond to the issue prohibits an appeal to land use board of appeals based on that issue. Similarly, failure to raise constitutional or other issues regarding any conditions of approval in sufficient detail to allow the planning commission to respond to the issue prohibits a lawsuit in circuit court on that basis. Now, I ask the members of the planning commission to disclose any ex parte contacts, bias, or conflicts of interest. Please indicate the nature and extent of the ex parte contacts, bias, or conflicts of interest, and indicate whether you intend to participate in or abstain from the hearing. Does anyone in the audience wish to challenge the planning commissioner's impartiality? Hearing none. Planning official Carla McLean will now present the staff report. Please.
So before I do that, I would just ask if there's anybody who's on the Zoom who wants to provide testimony. If you would please notate that in the chat, and whether it's going to be testimony in favor of the application or opposed to the application. And again, if anybody here wants to testify, there is a sign up sheet over on the sign up podium, and you would need to fill that out and provide it to Ms. Rollins, the city recorder. I'm still learning.
When I apologize, I didn't read the description of the
Oh.
appeal.
Okay,
Let me just read that real quick. Appeal AP 22-003, City Boardman Board right of way, 1 John 2:17 LLC and Jonathan Tallman appellant. The property is described as right of way adjacent to tax lots 3100, 3204, 3209, 3206, 3201, Assessor's Map 4N 2510, and tax lots 400 and 403, Assessor's Map 4N 2511. The area is zoned service center and is in the southeast quadrant of the Port of Martin interchange. The appeal is against zoning permit ZP 21-068, which approves the construction of road within right of way dedicated for road related purposes. Criteria for the appeal are found in the BDC chapter 4.1, types of applications and review procedures.
all right. So as background, well, there's a lot of background I guess I could give, but I'll try to keep it concise. The city issued a contract to have the loop roads built last summer. And that decision was appealed to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals. And so the city asked for, and I'm not gonna get the terms right, okay? So the city basically said, hold that thought, LUBA. We'll issue a permit for that. So it's taken a while, but we did issue the zoning permit for those roads to be constructed. At the time this started, the city was doing its due diligence to acquire right of way on both sides of Laurel Lane, both the east and the west side. The city has been unsuccessful to obtain right of way on the west side. They have been unsuccessful from obtaining right of way on the west side from a property owner. They have obtained some right of way on the west side, but not from the Tallmans. So the original zoning permit that was completed in last year, in the late summer, early fall, actually 11/16 of 21, included all of that property, because the thought was we're working with all of the parties. By the time we go to construction, we'll have right of way for all of this. And so the initial intent and the design work actually was for the entire loop road system size. When we finally issued this zoning approval in March, it was clear we did not have right of way or all of the right of way necessary on the west side to pursue that. And so when the zoning approval and the findings were written in March, it was written to only authorize construction on the east side. And so we had some conversations internally. We did provide notice of the decision in early April. And the appeal before you is the appeal from 1 John 2:17 and Jonathan Tallman appealing the decision. And so I'll just kind of run through the staff report here. And if you wanted to kind of follow along with where I'm drawing from as you work through the basically pages 2 and 3 of my staff report, I would tell you to look at just a couple pages further for the 8 pages of the appeal that are submitted by the Tallman's attorney, Sarah Mitchell. She identifies a number of, beginning on page 3 of her letter, specific issues raised on appeal, and those are what I respond to in the staff report. So, the city erred by not mailing notice of the application to First John or Jonathan Tallman. We did not mail that notice, however, we did mail the notice of decision, and they were afforded an appeal procedure, or an appeal option, which they have pursued. So the appellants have not established that not receiving notice of the application prejudiced their substantial rights, and the city has multiple opportunities to cure any notice deficiencies. And so the notice of this hearing also continues to cure any deficiencies that may have been. And again, the city failed to mail the notice of decision within 5 days after the decision was signed. Again, see the arguments above, forwarded by the city. The notice of decision was mailed on April 4th, at which time the decision became final for purposes of appeal. The city, they state that the city erred in granting zoning approval for the entire loop road within the Port of Morrow interchange area. The city did not issue zoning approval for the entire loop road. The decision, an attachment to their document was the original findings that we completed for the zoning approval that was issued. And in that zoning approval, it very clearly states that the approval for zoning permit ZP 21068 to allow the installation of infrastructure to include utilities and pavement in the southeast quadrant of the Port of Morrow interchange. It's very clearly identified that these are on the east side of Laurel Lane, not on the west side. The city erred in accepting the application and making a decision on the merits because the application did not contain the signed written authorization of First John. We're not authorizing any development on any property owned by First John. And as we've not obtained any right of way from the Tallmans, there is no proposed road development on the west side of Laurel Lane. The decision errs in failing to address all relevant approval criteria and standards, and is not based upon relevant approval criteria and standards. Our response there is that we're specifically looking at the Port of Morrow Interchange Area Management Plan, which was adopted in 2011. There's a table and there is a figure that both identify loop roads, their location, where they should be built, what kind of standards should be applied, and that is what we have applied. In their next error, they identify that we cannot approve this without undertaking site design review. Site design review is for developments. What's proposed is a road. What would be built adjacent to the road would be a development, and those development standards would be applied. So when one of the landowners on the east side of the Laurel Lane on the loop road comes to the city for a proposed development, those development standards will be applied to their development. At that same time, they will be asked to meet the other transportation improvement requirements, such as curb and sidewalk. All the city is doing at this point is installing infrastructure and putting pavement on the ground. We're not adding those additional parts and pieces. But I want to be clear that as we're doing this, there is a 4-foot shoulder going both directions. So we have in essence still included a path or a bike ped path or some way to move things beyond cars and trucks on this developed, on the road that is being installed. So again, development would happen off of that road. The road is an infrastructure improvement. The last one is that the decision errors in not finding compliance with Boardman Development Code 3.4.100. The Port Mortal Interchange Area Management Plan anticipates the creation of right-of-way for and the improvement of the loop roads would be accomplished by developers at the time of development. I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, that IMP never envisioned the city taking this project on. The IMP envisioned Fletcher Hobbs and the Yateses and the Taylors and the Tallmans and Morrow County and the Glens. I probably missed a landowner in there, but those landowners, the IMP always envisioned that as they developed, they would be responsible for taking on these roads. As we were having conversations between the county, the city, the port, local landowners starting back in about 2018, if I recall. Because I actually was at the table representing the county at the time. The city came to the table and said, we're willing to work with all of you and figure out how to accomplish this. And the city has continued to do that. At an expense above and beyond what the IMP ever anticipated for the city. So the city went out, they obtained that dedication by deed from the landowners. Again, all the landowners affected by the loop roads with the exception of the Tallmans. And the city is installing the infrastructure. So water was in the ground, they're adding waste, the sewer lines, and then a pavement on the ground. But we're not completing the development of the street. The street will not be built to that full standard. Again, that falls to the developers when they come in. So when Mr. Hobbs comes in and says, I want to develop on one of my properties that's going to be adjacent to the new pavement on the ground, he will be responsible for completing the improvements to the road portion of that as part of his development, whether that be sidewalks, street trees, curb, access points, all of those types of things. That was what was installed in the staff report. Yesterday, attached to the staff report was simply the appellant's submittal, which was submitted on April 12th. They included 8 pages of a letter, and then they attached at that point our notice of decision that we had mailed previously. Then yesterday they submitted an additional submittal, which we will address in a bit. So I'm gonna, at this point in time, conclude the staff report. And again, as the city is also the applicant, that also is the applicant's testimony. And at this point in time, we have a sign-up sheet only from Sarah Mitchell, is that correct? Nobody else in here either has filled out a form?
I've filled one.
Have you submitted it to the clerk yet?
Oh, I didn't know we had.
It was stated in the opening statement that it needs to be provided to the clerk.
So just so I know the process, so once I sign this, then I take it over to you guys?
Yes, it's
Okay.
the only way we would know somebody had filled one out.
Okay, well, I didn't know the process, I apologize.
So you have 2, you have Jonathan Tallman and Sarah Mitchell. I don't know which one of them wants to go first, so
Go ahead, sir.
we need to wait for the chair to call for that testimony.
At this time, would anyone wish to speak in favor of the application?
They're going to be in opposition.
Hearing none, does anyone wish to speak against the application?
Yes, I'll go first. All right. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. For the record, my name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm with the Killington Law Group, PO Box 159, Lake Oswego, Oregon 97034. And I represent the appellants, first John 217 LLC and Jonathan Tallman, who, as Ms. McLean mentioned, are the property owners of the land on the west side of Laurel Lane. So the first thing I wanted to point out tonight is because this decision has been appealed, it's not effective until the appeal's been decided. And that's under your code BDC 4.1.400F for a type 2 decision, or 4.1.300F for a type 1 decision, which we're not conceding that this decision is, but for either decision type, the appealed decision that approves the loop road isn't effective. And that means construction of the loop road, which, as you're probably aware, is already fully underway, can't continue until this appeal is decided. And as Ms. McLean noted, Mr. Tallman has appealed to LUBA, the city's decision to enter into the contract to build the loop road and the other improvements in the Laurel Lane right-of-way, which includes the installation of a sewer line that requires the closure of Laurel Lane. And the city has previously represented that detours were going to be in place to allow Mr. Tallman and his customers continued access to his coffee shop during the construction. But this morning, Laurel Lane was closed entirely and no detours have been put in place. And because customers can't access his business, Mr. Tallman was forced to close his coffee shop today. And he's going to have to stay closed until the city reopens the road again. And we don't know when that'll be. But my point is the city has barreled ahead with construction of this loop road without an effective decision in hand. And that eagerness to get the road in at all costs has caused Mr. Tallman and his business to suffer not only financially, but it's caused them to lose trust in the city actually doing what they're going to say they're going to do, which would be putting detours in place to allow access to his business. So the city should stop construction until this loop road business is figured out. But to turn the aspects of the decision itself, Mr. Tallman was rightfully surprised when he received a copy of the decision that, while at first glance, it appeared to only approve the loop road on the east side of Laurel Lane. The actual zoning approval sheet that was signed off on by the city included Mr. Tallman's property. And that's tax lots 3205, 3207, and 3302. Now, we appreciate that the city's acknowledged, and as Ian explained, that it didn't intend to approve the road on Mr. Tallman's property. But I just wanted to make clear that the Planning Commission should make absolutely clear in its findings on this appeal that this decision absolutely does not approve the loop road on the Tallman property. So, secondly, I want to talk about the design of the loop road itself. The city's decision makes no findings whatsoever that the loop road complies with the street design standards in the city's code. And in fact, it doesn't comply with those standards. And this issue is important for Mr. Tallman because even if this decision doesn't approve the road on his property, it's going to set a precedent for how the road is going to be approved and constructed on his property in the future if and when that happens. And I think it's also important to point out that the fact that the city is the developer in this instance doesn't excuse it from complying with the city's standards for roads. The staff report told you that the loop road is allowed outright in the service center zone as a transportation facility identified in the TSP that doesn't require future land use review and approval, but that's not correct. Your code requires all developments in the city to undergo site design review. And site design review requires either a type 2 or type 3 land use review and approval. Your code defines development as all improvements on a site, including things like paved areas and grading, which describe a road, for example. But even if site design review doesn't apply here directly, as staff has suggested to you, the loop road is still subject to the road standards in Chapter 3. One, because the definition of street and road in the code says that streets meet the city standards in chapter 3.4, section 100. And two, those standards apply by operation of BDC 3.4000 sub B that says standard specifications for construction of transportation facilities within the city shall occur in accordance with the standards in chapter 3. And in fact, the staff report even acknowledges that the construction of the loop road has to be done in accordance with those standards. So I encourage you to take a look at the letter that we submitted yesterday that outlines all the ways the loop road doesn't comply with the standards in chapter 3, including those for road width, bike lane, sidewalk, street lighting, etc. But in the interest of being concise, I just want to highlight one of those standards, and that's the road width. How wide is the road supposed to be? So the POM IMP says that the loop road has to be developed to city collector standards. But the problem is that the city has different types of collectors that have different standards, and the IMP doesn't specify what type of collector the loop road is. We believe that it's a minor collector. City and staff apparently believe it's a neighborhood collector. But the TSP says that all collector facilities in the TSP are minor collectors. And the TSP's description of minor collectors talks about how minor collectors channel traffic into arterials, and Laurel Lane in this location is an arterial. The TSP's description of neighborhood collectors doesn't mention connection to arterials. So on balance, it seems like the loop road is a minor collector. So assuming that's the case, it doesn't meet the standards for minor collectors. Specifically, the required minimum right-of-way width is 68 feet. The loop road right-of-way is 60 feet. And the required minimum roadway width is 47 feet. But the loop road is 32 feet wide. And that's including the shoulders. It's 40 feet wide on the curb. It's a little bigger in that area. But even if the loop road is a neighborhood collector, the code says that the required minimum roadway width is 38 feet. And the loop road is smaller than the standard too. So again, I mean, I don't want to go into excruciating detail on all the other standards that the loop road doesn't meet. So I encourage you to read our letter, and the planning commission should decide that the loop road should be denied. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, Mr. Tallman,
Thank you. I'm Jonathan Coleman. I'm the landowner of this property, and I have a business that I work at. A lot of things that were stated by the city in that staff report are just totally inaccurate and just flat out wrong. We issued a LUBA case, and we wanted to put it on pause so that we could sit down and go over this face to face as far as how wide the road is, how big the road is going to be, whether it's going to be 65 feet, 75 feet, who is going to be the developer. When the city took this responsibility on, they said they were going to be the developer. In fact, if you look at the agreement at the IAM, they said they were going to develop everything. And we didn't put that on them. The city put that on themselves when they did that resolution back in 2011, stating that they would be in charge of it because they didn't want ODOT to be in charge of it. So the city put the standards, they set the own standards, and the city set the own standards for the roads. We have never said what standards it is for the road. The city has set all the standards for what the roads are to be. And there's, if you go back to the documentation in 2011 with the IM. Another thing is, our property is almost 4 acres that this is taking. The other landowners are less than 1/4 of an acre that, I think about 1/2 acre. UEC bought that land from Edwin, but again, Ours is about 4 acres that it's taking. So that is why we're going over these details, because in a sense, I have a usable less than, 15 acres after this whole thing is over. That's why it's very important the specifics get done, because I'm left with Swiss cheese land after this is done. That's why I had to go over this. The land right now, the road is closed. It says in your guys' own code that you guys said you were gonna follow, that there would be no construction until the appeal is done. And when the appeal was submitted, the city admitted that they made an error. But even then, I had to appeal that. I had to pay $250 to appeal this to you guys. Otherwise, it would have been set in stone. I never got any say. I never knew any comments about it. Even though we had a LUBA case against this, the city never came to me and said, hey, Jonathan, let's work this out and let's go over this. We got nothing as far as any information documented that says, hey, we're working on this loop road. We'd love to have you in on this discussion because it actually includes your property. I mean, there should have been communication right there as well too. But the city went ahead and just submitted an application that was my property and not their property, okay? To me, the processes and the procedures have to be followed. Everything has to be followed. Specifically, if you go ahead and deny this appeal, you're basically saying this whole thing is a joke. There's no use even showing up to this because the decision has already been made. Because if that's the case, why did they not document all these things as far as getting them done and through the process? I mean, I don't understand why the city sets these standards and then they don't even follow their own standards about what they're doing. It's so frustrating. Again, I am asking for a discussion with the city on this to get this done. This is affecting my business. And I'm sorry if I'm getting emotional or I'm speaking with passion, but at what point do I say, this is ridiculous? Please understand what I am trying to do here. I'm trying to make this community better, but this is not making my community better. It's making it worse by not even following the same rules and procedures that their own city set. This has to be addressed. Please deny this application. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone still wishing to speak against the application?
Currently, we have a Chandler Shack. They would need to identify themselves and provide their address for the record.
Yeah, my name is Chandler Shack. I live at 740 Southwest Mount Adams, Boardman, Oregon. I logged in today, not really caring either way, but I do think the city should deny this. It does sound like it is being appealed. It does sound like there are some discrepancies. And when it comes to developing or building or infrastructure, I mean, city and state have very strict what the individual and the citizen has to do. And I think it's fair that the state or the city have to follow the same. I also think it needs to be taken into consideration that that road was closed today. I live in town. I had no idea it was going to be closed today. And the people who do operate the business there are taking a loss and they deserve to be compensated for that. That's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Was there anyone else wishing to speak against the application? And no one else submitted online? Hearing no more, does anyone have any neutral testimony?
We don't have any, nobody has submitted at this point.
Okay, hearing none. Does the applicant wish to provide?
Yeah, and here again, we're both the applicant and the staff. So at this point in time, I'm going to turn the floor over to Chris Crane, the city's attorney, and he will be providing our rebuttal.
Thank you, Carla. Planning Commission. Are we getting an echo?
We're not on this end.
Sounds good here.
Okay. Yeah, as Carla mentioned, my name is Chris Crane and I'm the city's land use lawyer for this project. I'd like to just address several of the comments that were made by the other folks who testified. The first is that it is important to understand, and particularly in light of Mr. Shack's comments, that the city is following all of the applicable standards, and I'll get into the specifics about that. But we absolutely agree that no one is above the law, whether it's the city or a private individual or the state or anyone else. And this road is designed and will be constructed in compliance with all of the applicable standards. On the access to the Tallman property, there's access via Wilson Lane. It's my understanding that, I mean, Mr. Tallman obviously got here tonight, so there's access in and out of the property through their northern driveway to Wilson Lane, and that's being maintained throughout. So they're not cut off, and we wouldn't cut off anyone completely from access for any length of time. And this project, we hope will wrap up, that at least the Laurel Lane aspects of it will wrap up hopefully tomorrow, but may run into Friday morning. So we're talking about a few days, and the road's open right now. They cover obviously the trenches with the plates, and so there is access in and out. There is access throughout the day, albeit not via Laurel. You have to go around by way of Wilson. And then on the notion that this somehow sets precedent for construction of the Western Loop, there's just no basis for that. In fact, the city has essentially concluded that the Western Loop will have to develop as development occurs, which means it's going to happen in a piecemeal fashion, rather than in the more holistic single unified project way that this Eastern Loop is being constructed. So the development of the Western Loop of this IAM of these roadways is going to really look very different than this development of this roadway. In response to some of the comments made by Ms. Mitchell, they rely, let me be clear, that they are completely without merit, rely on cherry picking effectively portions of sentences and ignoring the law. So let me explain what I mean. For example, she says that the TSP says that all collectors are minor collectors, and that's not true. That's a portion of the sentence. The sentence says, for purposes of TPR compliance, all collectors are minor collectors. The TPR is the transportation planning rule, and it does not apply to this application. Therefore, that entire sentence only applies when the TPR is relevant, and it's not relevant here. So that sentence has no bearing on this application whatsoever. More importantly, under Oregon law, the city's comprehensive plan simply does not apply to individual development applications. The comprehensive plan is implemented through your land use regulations, the development code. And once that is enacted and acknowledged by the state, then the comprehensive plan doesn't apply. So whatever's in the comprehensive plan is interesting reading, but it doesn't apply directly to this application. You have to rely on the development standards that are set forth in the development code. In that regard, she is correct that chapter 3.4.100 sets forth the relevant standards. And it has a table 3.4.100 that describes two different kinds of collectors, a minor collector and a neighborhood collector. And they have different right-of-way width requirements. The right-of-way width for a neighborhood collector is 60 feet. And that is precisely what this road is being constructed to. So this is a neighborhood collector that complies with the width requirements in table 3.4.100F of the city's development code. She also, in her written testimony, argues that the curve radius for a minor collector is 350 feet under that same section 3.4.100, and that's correct for a minor collector. But this is a neighborhood collector. And if you read the entire code provision, and this is 3.4.100N, it says the curve radius for a minor collector is 350 feet. For all other roads, it's 100 feet. And this road as a neighborhood collector falls under the category of all other roads. So the curve radius is only 100 feet, not 350 feet. Lastly, requirement 3.4.100J for sidewalks and bike lanes also says that the obligation for maintaining those facilities falls on the adjacent property owner, who is not a party to this application. This is a city project, and the adjacent property owners are not the signatories or parties to this application. And the city is obviously reluctant to impose an obligation on a property owner when they're not even a party to the application. That standard for sidewalks and street trees is met when the adjacent properties develop. When those property owners come in and willingly develop their properties, then they take on the obligation to build and maintain those facilities, sidewalks, bike lanes, and so on. So that's how the city ensures compliance with that code criterion. And Ms. McLean's staff report describes that. As the adjacent properties develop, the sidewalks, street trees, bike lanes, and so on will be installed. And that's how that will occur. And the city presumably lacks authority to impose that obligation on property owners right now when they're not even a party to the application. So I believe that's everything I wanted to address, but I do want to loop back to the beginning. This is why we believe that the road as proposed, as designed, and as it's being constructed is being done in compliance with all of the city's standards when they are correctly read, interpreted, and applied. With that, that's all I had to say, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, the public testimony portion of this hearing is now closed. Does the staff any response to a question or issue raised by the testimony?
I think we've done that.
Planning Commission have any questions for the staff? I have a question. So, and I may have missed it, there's a lot of paperwork.
There's a lot of paperwork, yes.
So I have the names. I'm looking for the portion that specifies the southeast quadrant of the interchange specifically.
For the decision.
Right.
So if you have found this document in the paperwork, this is zoning approval on the top, okay? Go back one page, or go forward, I should say, forward in the packet. The page just before that is the last page of the, so as staff, for the zoning approval, I did a findings of fact. And on page 4, that decision there states clearly that we approve the zoning permit to allow the installation of infrastructure to include utilities and pavement in the southeast quadrant of the Port of Morrow interchange. This installation will be consistent with the IAMP figure 7.2 and table 7.1 and be consistent with the loop road improvements 2021 sheet 2, which are all attached. And again, all of that is limited to the southeast quadrant. So the IMP envisioned both south or east and west in both the table and in the figure. But this decision limited that to the southeast quadrant. Yep.
So close.
Just had to go back one page. It's kind of there. It's yeah.
One other question. Regarding the startup construction. I'm fuzzy. So hopefully some clarification. So my understanding is that the construction will not start until after this appeal.
So Chris, do you want to take that one? The timing of the start of construction and where we are in this. I mean, I guess I would say this much. Type 1 versus type 2 decision. I initially issued this as a type 1 decision initially, which does not have an appeal opportunity. It was, we then went through the process and decided to issue it as a type 2 decision. And construction had started. So, Chris, do you want to add anything to that or correct anything I may have just said?
No, that's correct. There are, as the planning commissioners know, there are many different kinds of procedures for different types of land use decisions, type 1, type 2, type 3. The type 1 is for ministerial kind of decisions that don't require an appeal, don't allow an appeal. In this case, because of the amount of public interest involved, none of us was comfortable with a decision that couldn't be appealed, and we thought it was important to give people an opportunity to speak and be heard, and to give this planning commission, frankly, an opportunity to weigh in on the project. So we collectively agreed that we would schedule or treat this as a type 2 and go ahead and follow the type 2 process. But that's why it was originally issued as a type 1 and why the work has gone ahead, because it is authorized under the city's land use regulations.
And I would just, to follow that up a little further, if you look at in the development code in the table that is in, I think it's in 2 point, it's in the where it delineates the use zones and the rural service center. It calls out that transportation improvements are a use allowed. So this is a project identified and adopted. In this case, it's not in the adopted transportation system plan, but in the interchange area management plan, which is a subset of the TSP. So in essence, it is there, not requiring future land use review and approval. And I argue that it fits that category and does not require additional land use approval. So
strictly speaking, it's not even a land use decision, because there's an exemption in state law for transportation facilities that are consistent with the comprehensive plan and land use regulations. And here you've got a transportation facility that's expressly called out by the IAMP that's part of your transportation system plan, and it's consistent with the applicable development standards. So it's not even a land use decision. But that's a distinction that lawyers love and nobody else really cares about. And we wanted to make sure that people have an opportunity to speak and be heard.
does that answer your question?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
might have go back into what Jack said. But so it was denied tonight. Does that mean construction stops even though you've already started?
I'm sorry, Ethan, you broke up a little bit there, and I'm not sure I got all of your question. Could you give it another shot?
So if the construction, everything got turned and it stopped, would that stop your construction even though it's already started, or how does that work?
So you're still wrong, Ethan, but are you trying to ask if the application is denied tonight, does the construction continue?
Yeah.
So the city would have to decide what to do in that event. I assume if it's denied, either way, frankly, whether it's approved or denied, it's probably going to appeal to the city council. So it's still pending before the city at one level or another. And the city could decide to continue with the project as it has thus far, or decide to pause until we get a final decision from the city council. But at that point, the city would clearly have a decision to make.
Yeah, and I don't think we're ready to answer that question tonight. That would be something that would, depending on the outcome of the planning commission decision tonight, the city will have to, if the city chooses to uphold the appeal and deny the zoning permit, which is not what staff's recommendation is, then the city would have to, as staff, we would sit down with us and our attorney and talk about that.
Does anyone have any questions for Jack? Is there any discussion by the planning commission? I've got some notes. I feel like it seems fairly straightforward. To me, in my opinion, there's been communication from both sides. There's been talk about poor communication, which I can appreciate. It is a little odd in light of lawyers on both sides, which is typically where the communication comes from. I'm always personally a little disappointed when it goes down the legal route. It's expensive for both parties involved. Appreciate. It looks pretty straightforward. Being a type 1 decision, having an appeal, which is a type 2 decision, construction being in the southeast quadrant of the section. The construction blocking the road while there is still access is slightly unfortunate. I'm sure it does present some logistical issues. But we have discuss.
Didn't drive out today, but yesterday I did drive out there. And, they did have the road blocked off. It started at 8 o'clock. is when I went out there. And we were just real close on it. And then by 5 o'clock, we were picked up.
Were there any like detour signs or?
Yeah, so there's road work and road close signs that were up yesterday. And I access to Yates Lane is coming in from the north side. Yeah, getting that way. But I believe Tom's property, the driveway on the south was open, was south side, yeah. So not directly in front of this business, but the driveway further. So,
I don't really have comments. My understanding, so Friday would be, it would be, oh, sorry, question for the city, Friday. or-
Right, it's my understanding, there was a couple hours this morning, they put the pipe under the road, then the plates went on. And tomorrow they will, initiate the process to put the manholes in. The hope is it finishes tomorrow, but it may continue on to Friday. And they will finish up the manholes. At that point in time, the work in Laurel Lane will be done, and all of the work at that point in time will be on Yates Lane on the east side and on the new Devon Loop Road. Right, until we pay. And there'll be some closures, when we have to make that connection onto Laurel, there'll be some paving, and we'll have to fix the cut. There'll be a cut where the work is happening that we'll have to. No. Yeah.
So just, I actually would like to go back to Seth with a question. Apologize for jumping around here. I'd like to understand for the record, at what point this went from a type 1 to a type 2 decision? Was it at the point of the appeal?
Nope, somewhere between March 11th and April something, April 4th. So,
Yeah.
so March 11th was the day. I'm gonna have to look at those documents too that are in there, so I can give you those dates. So March 11th, I signed the zoning approval and took the extra effort to do the findings of fact to approve this as a, and I guess the whole thing was kind of, you know, I was coming from the perspective that this is a type 1 decision. In fact, I actually argued that we didn't need to do a decision, but because there was a previous LUBA appeal to the construction contract, we initiated this to do this zoning approval. My position from the point in time when I came on and got engaged with this, which was in February, that this was a type 1 decision. So we issued this on March 11th. We then had that ongoing conversation, and this was mailed, the notice of decision was mailed on April 4th. So that shift from is this a no decision needed to being a type 1 decision to being a type 2 decision happened during that period of time.
And I'll take some responsibility for that. I just, given the amount of attention this roadway's gotten, I was not comfortable with the decision that, you know, for which there was no notice sent out and no opportunity for an appeal. So I advocated between myself and Carla and city manager that we should go ahead and provide public notice of the decision and allow folks an opportunity to appeal if they wish.
Okay, and what date did construction start?
Oh, somewhere In an early April timeframe. Well, there's a pre-construction meeting. Yeah, I don't know that I could go get my calendar and probably answer that question. But I don't know specifically.
It depends a little bit on how you define it too. I mean, for example, staging has been going on for, I don't know, since the middle of the winter, I think. But if you're talking about actually grading and moving earth, moving dirt, I don't know, last couple of weeks. Well, last 3-4 weeks, probably.
Right. There was a pre-construction meeting, April 11th sticks in my head. As a pre-construction meeting date.
More questions. Apologize for the order here. So at that point, so I'm trying to
You trying to understand the thought process?
timeline, yes, and thought process along that. After that, on the 12th was the date that the appeal was received,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So at that point, at some point after that, within the last couple of weeks, ground was broke.
Mhm.
Was that not based on this appeal?
The city made a conscientious decision to continue construction. Okay. No, it was a conscientious decision, appeal in hand, to continue construction. Yeah.
So can I ask a question or
Please,
does somebody? What? Yes.
please, yes.
Okay, so, at the beginning of this, there was you didn't get the right of ways down the one side. Correct, so that's why you're doing the east side and not the west? But this still affects the west?
This has no effect on the west side. It has an effect in Laurel Lane because we are putting the sewer line under the street to get from one side to the other. So that there will be the ability to provide sewer to the west side should they ever further develop.
Okay,
There's no right of way has been obtained from every affected property owner on both sides except for the Tallmans.
And frankly, the way construction costs are going, there's not the budget to do the west side right now anyway. So this decision only authorizes the eastern loop and those intersection improvements where Yates and Devon will intersect with Laurel Lane. But otherwise it has no impact. It does nothing to advance the western loop.
okay, so there's no consequences to that side if this is denied or whatever happens here and moving forward.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
I got
correct. It affects the,
Okay.
yeah, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
As far as
Actually-
context,
It probably affects the east side property owners who are counting on this road going in.
yeah, I was about to mention that, but I think from what I'm hearing, even I've heard, the consequence regarding this would be the loss of infrastructure on the east side. Currently, the construction slowing traffic at certain times, very north, southbound traffic on the wall.
Right, and that, those impacts to Laurel, again, other than when we get to the paving piece, there will be some impacts to Laurel when we're paving. But at this point in time, the impacts to Laurel should be concluded by Friday, or hopefully tomorrow, realistically Friday.
Well, when we pave, it will be one lane at a time, you know, it will not be those.
Right. Yeah.
It'll be flagged. It'll be marked.
Any other discussion?
I'm sorry, the opportunity for public comment was passed.
What she said. Is there anyone who would like to entertain a motion at this time? If not.
I move to adopt the recommendation of the planning commission, upholding the planning official's decision approving the zoning permits. CP 21-068. Therefore, denying the appeal, as long as we make sure that it's stated it's going on the east side of that, it will not be affecting the west side. Just want to make sure that it's properly documented that we are not touching the west side of Laurel Lane.
There's a motion on the floor, is there discussion? No, is there a second for the motion?
Second.
Member arguments, there's been a motion in a second, can we roll for the vote, please?
Absolutely. Right. Commissioner tonight.
Commissioner tonight, did you hear that as a call for the vote?
Oh, okay. Approved.
Okay, thank you.
To be clear, the yeas are in favor of adopting the recommendation by the planning official.
Yes, the motion was to uphold the decision and deny the appeal. That was the motion, yes.
Commissioner Jimenez,
Yes.
Commissioner Ernst,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Slaughter,
No.
and then Vice Chair Mercy.
No.
It's 4-2.
4-2,
4-2.
motion carries. Any discussion items? Planning official report.
So I don't have anything formal. Over time, we'll develop something that'll be a little more formal, and we'll probably have a written report and share that with you all. I guess what I would say is that 3 months in, Barry passed away on the 15th. I started on the 15th. If you'd ever been in his office, you wouldn't recognize it. Much thanks to Rolf Craig, who came on board 10 days after I did, I think, pretty quickly after I did, to help pick up a pretty big load. Rolf has done just yeoman's work helping me kind of get through that backlog in the papers. We've occupied the large conference room in the back corner of this side of the building for the last 2 months. I think people are ready for us to get done and move out of there, but we also have used, the city has, Marisol is a high school student who has been our intern this year. And the last couple of weeks I've used her to help me continue to organize kind of that backlog of papers and kind of to figure out where we are. And I'm still doing that. I'm still trying to figure out kind of what projects are in process and where we're at with those. And I have to say that the developers and the people that have been coming in, and I've said, look, you gotta start over, because I don't know where you were at. And they've been just generous and kind and very supportive, as has the staff in understanding that, you know, there was a lot going on. There's still a lot going on, and we gotta figure out how to, you know, get back ahead of it and keep moving forward. I think what's exciting in all of that is, you know, I've been talking to those developers who are doing housing developments, and they don't seem to be really slowing down. And the commercial development side, I often tell the story that it was years ago, and I think this even started before Karen was city manager, and certainly in her early years as city manager, that we would sit in meetings and talk about how you can't get anybody to move here and build a house because there's no hardware store, but the hardware store won't come here because there's not enough people. And what's been fun is when I was on the planning side, I began to see, when I was at the county, I began to see that change. And now I'm in the thick of it here. And I mean, we've got a Family Dollar, we've got a Dollar General, we've got other people who are asking questions and making inquiries. And let's just say hotels and hotels. I mean, and with the recent announcement, love them or hate them, and I'm not here to pass judgment, but with the recent Amazon announcement that we've got potentially up to 5 more data centers in this area, that means more people. I mean, before the meeting started, you probably noticed the security trucks outside. They were in doing a lot of work with the security and fire alarm system here. They were like, are there any hotels around here where we can get a room in? It's like, no, because during the week, they're occupied by the people who are doing construction here. And when you look at the number of people who live in Boardman and know that there's like some 8,000 jobs at the port, and then you've got the construction that's happening all with that. A couple more hotels is probably a good thing. So the development is not stopping, it's just moving forward. And yeah, you know, I'm having fun with this. I'm going to be working with Karen and Rick to find my replacement. I'm not long term. I agreed to be here for a defined period of time, and they keep twisting my arm and it's not working. So we're going to get that kicked off here pretty soon. If I can ever corner Karen and Rick at the same time, that might be what you do. That might be it. Yeah. So, but I just have to say I'm enjoying myself. I'm having a lot of fun. I know that the last time we met, it was like, fire hose. I mean, tonight it was like, I gotta put faces to names together, because it was like, I know I met several of you and I know you were here in person. It was like, it's a blur. So that rush is kind of slowing down, and I feel like I'm kind of getting my arms around things and getting a handle on it. So I know that you asked at that last planning commission meeting some questions about process and procedure and what is our job and how do we do this, and we'd like to understand the code better. There was a lot of questions that came out, and I do want to sit down and begin to have that conversation and answer those, and maybe make proceedings like tonight easier for you, so that, you know, we kind of get a sense of what we're doing and how we do it and how to move through it. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have, you know, about my role, you know, or write questions down. We need to resolve me being comfortable that you're getting stuff that's getting emailed, and so, you know, there's just some things like that internally that I want to resolve, and we'll work on that between now and next month. There will be a hearing next month. We do have an action for June already. We are actually amending the interchange area management plan at the Port of Morrow. The focus of that amendment to the document is on the north side of the freeway, not on the south side. There'll be no changes to section 7, the basic project section of the IMP. relative to the loop roads, all of the changes are related to what would happen on the north side. And if you read the current IMP for the Port of Morrow interchange, it has no discussion in it about the north side of the interchange. All of the discussion is about the loop roads, because 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, when we did all of that work, that's where the concern was on the south side, straightening that curve in Laurel and putting the loop roads in and doing those things. So it's really interesting to see how 10 years has changed that transportation dynamic. And where we're really seeing the concerns now and have been for several years is on the westbound on and off ramps and on the north side of the interchange. So that will be June. We may, another action could certainly come in between now and the time that we do notice, but that has been noticed to the Department of Land Conservation and Development because it is an amendment to our development code and transportation plan documents. So we've started that process. It's also a joint process with the county. So they will be moving the same thing through their planning commission. And what will happen next month will be a recommendation to the city council. Their planning commission will make a recommendation to board of commissioners. Hopefully at the end, it all comes out the same. And then it goes to the Oregon Transportation Commission for final adoption. So that is happening. Yeah, don't leave, Vice Chair, I've got 2 documents for you to sign. Before the evening is we can conclude the evening, I just need your signature before you leave the building. So that would conclude my report, and again, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. It is exciting, yeah.
Okay, public comment.
I am really excited about Boardman. I moved back to Boardman High School here at Riverside High School.
Mr. Tallman, would you please say your name and your address for the
Okay,
record?
I'm sorry. Yes,
Yeah, would you mind speaking in the microphone?
yes, sorry about that.
Yeah.
So John, I too moved back to Boardman because I'm really excited about being in my hometown. I went to Riverside High School. I graduated Riverside High School. I basically lived here since 1978, 1979. So I take great pride in being a pirate. I really enjoy that. What frustrates me is, we just have this bond that didn't pass, and I was actually a no vote on that. But the reason why it frustrated me is Amazon got a tax abatement on another tax abatement, and the whole point of a bond is you need more money for a bond. But I would have been a yes if we were getting more growth from the city of Boardman at a 6 to 10% rate. At the city hall meeting, it had 14 new construction building permits. That isn't a growth rate that is a growing growth rate. If we would have had a growing growth rate of 6 to 10% on our houses, I would have been a yes vote for that vote because there would have been more residential in it. And then that would have made it so that our bond commitment would have been less, which would have meant more money as far as tax dollars that were paid. So I really want to challenge, the city and the planning commission. What can we do to make Boardman more competitive as far as our costs? Because if you look at the Boardman costs, our housing prices are just as expensive as Pasco. And as my coffee shop, I ask my customers, well, why aren't you moving here? Why aren't you moving here? They're all renting. And I don't want this to be a sugar rush. I do want people to make a commitment. I do want people to move here. I've invited a lot of people to say, hey, why don't you move to Boardman? And those are key things that and please, I'm not trying to be critical or criticism about it. Let's challenge ourselves to find opportunities. One of them to me is the site development. Instead of it being on the first floor, okay, getting free, if you want a big developer to move in, why not make it 200 to 300 houses that they build, and then they get that site development charge off. And if they only build 1 or 2, they are actually charged differently than if they were charged building it, because those buyers are going to get that cost savings, and that's why they're going to want to move to Boardman, which helps our tax burden and those tax abatements of people that aren't paying. And we want people not just to rent in this area. We want people to grow and build a foundation and build roots in Boardman, which I think you guys all believe and want as well too. So I challenge you, please don't take this the right way, I just challenge you, how we can do that together so that people want to live here in Boardman instead of commuting all the way from Pasco, Hermiston, Pendleton, and Dallas, and Arlington. Thank you, I appreciate that.
Was there any comments? Would you like to make a comment, sir? This is meeting time. This is meeting time.
I'm not sure it's so really.
As much or as little as you would like, sir. If you can state your name.
And my name is Randy Baker. And I,
And your address, please, for the record?
70251 Pioneer Lane. And I'm number 4 of 6 of the Baker bloodline generations that have been Boardmanites and are Boardmanites. And earlier this month, I've been gone for over 40 years, doing a couple of careers. I grew up here, graduated here. The rest of my siblings were pretty much stayed in the area. I could give you a long list of what's been done here by Bakers. And I'm just gonna, I got emotional speaking for a little bit at the city hall meeting. In my experience of trying to help a little bit more in the community other than with the church. As I said earlier in the month, it was the first time at a city hall meeting, city council meeting, excuse me. And this is my first time at a planning commission here. I don't know how much tenure is in the seats by the people that are in the chairs. But I just have to state that just as a person that has had my adult life somewhere else and involved in civic affairs, fraternal groups, other building committees and whatnot. I find it personally unfortunate the route that is being taken here in the city. I enjoy doing research. I've known Terry Tallman for a long time. I met and became familiar with Jonathan about 1.5 years ago. There's things that have happened that there's bitterness involved. There has been emotional outbreaks on record given. I will not be attending any further attendance of anything for City of Boardman. I had thoughts too, but nearing 70 years of age, I have been personally exposed to some events that are going on that are not healthy for the good of the town that I love. And in your situation here tonight, when you talk about what's going to be going on the east side of Laurel Lane and the benefactors of east side of Laurel Lane, just take a look at the 2020 document of the IEMP of who the people were that gave the input from the community. And you'll find they're the landowners of the east side. Now, in Fairbanks, Alaska is where I was. And I was involved in things that tried to stop things that were just not right. And just my observation this month of the city of Boardman, it's just my own personal observation, but with 2 full 20 years careers, one as a retired military officer and one as a retired peace officer. I have to make the choice to be able to wake up in the morning and see myself that Tonight is my decision that I just cannot forwardly go. I want to involve myself with what's going on here. I know people with dollar signs and people see a lot of things going on from their own perspective, and that's why people are different. But I tend to look at a more macro view of things and instead of other ways. I wanted to develop some land here in Boardman. There's 4 parcels now that more than likely in the next few years, I'll sell all those 4 parcels. But I made an attempt with this city to work out a trade with a piece that what's the initial? BCDA. Your BCDA wanted a downtown piece of property. And the city had some property that's been sitting vacant, full of weeds and sagebrush most of my life. And I offered to make a development out there. And I was told I get a return call twice, and I never did. I didn't get a word back from the offer I made on the arena, soccer field, church, and things I wanted to put out on that. And I can feel myself getting pretty emotional, but things like that don't set well with me. Because my 2 careers, integrity was darn important. And I'm gonna stop there. I don't know any of you people. I've met Karen a couple times, but I'm just very disappointed. And if I was 20 years younger, maybe I'd be better in a better mood to challenge what's going on. I saw the faces of the people up front there early in the month at City Hall, and I saw the people's faces here tonight. My only departing comment was I've been in your positions in many different boards and organizations. Stand up for what you know, what's right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Any other public comment? Anyone online still? Science. Any comments from the commission?
There is a question. If you can hear me, there's
There's a question in the chat.
In the chat. Oh, Stephen, is it McElroy? Is it?
Yes, that would, if you have a public comment or a question, I'm sorry, I can't. Mr. McElroy, this would be an appropriate time to ask it. Mr. McElroy, you're muted. If you wanted to ask that question, you would need to unmute yourself.
Streets, area 4609, Front Street. What is the city's intention?
Oh, are you asking about the replat that was approved earlier? Okay, so, the city has received a request to sell the lot that is being created, the larger lot that's being created to the Boardman Community Development Association for a commercial retail development. I don't know the specifics of that because we've not gotten to that point of, I mean, at some point in time, they'll have to come in and make an application. But they have to acquire, we have to complete the replat, we'd have to go through the land sale process, and that's a city council involved, engaged process. And once the property is sold, then I would anticipate that the BCDA would come in and make application for their development. And at that point in time, we'll have a better sense of what that is. It is zoned tourist commercial, highway sub-district. If their application would be identified as use allowed in that, it would be a planning official type 1 decision. So, does that answer your question, Mr. McElroy? Thank you. If you have questions about that, Mr. McElroy, you're welcome to come by City Hall. I'm here most mornings. I am only here half-time, so please work with me on that. If you call or send an email, I will try to get back to you, but I am not guaranteeing that I can return calls on the day I receive them. Just don't have that capacity, so.
I would like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. It's been a very long night. Appreciate your time and patience. And at this time, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Did you get your answers? Ron, did you get your answer?
We have an agenda.
Um,
Other questions?